city of Isle of Palms is experiencing a busy summer season. I talked one-on-one with the city's police chief, Kevin Cornett, about how it is going from a public safety standpoint for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Isle of Palms Police Chief Kevin Cornett, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, the Isle of Palms has had a busy summer season so far. So tell me what's new, what's now on the Isle of Palms?
One of the biggest things that's new for us would be that we have outsourced parking. And the benefit of that for the police department is in the past we hired beach service officers and they were assigned to parking, traffic control, beach patrol, and pretty much everything that was not normal, just police calls. Now they can patrol the beach, and they're helping us to make sure that we've got that relationship on the beach with everybody that's out there. And then the parking company can deal with just parking, and so they're out there and they're addressing that, and it really frees our personnel up to address the needs and concerns of the people that are out here visiting our island.
And Chief, I'm probably I should be asking the mayor or somebody else this. But by outsourcing to this parking company, how much is that saving the city of Isle of Palms?
That I don't know. That is all I know is it freed up our personnel to be able to address needs on the beach, and they're doing a great job. And of course, you know, we've heard a lot of people saying they're writing more tickets, and of course they are, because that is their sole job. Whereas in the past, we've had multiple hats that we were wearing in conjunction with writing tickets. So with parking enforcement. So now that's all they do. They're going to write more tickets than we did.
And well, let me ask you this, Dan. As far as your budget, how much is that happen? How much is that money being, sent over to someplace else now that the parking company's taking over parking?
So parking has always had its own budget that's kind of been separate from the police departments. We still have the beach service officers that we pay for to come out here, and we might not have 10 of them like we did when we were doing parking, but we've got about 3 of them right now that come out, and their sole job is to patrol the beach. And, it gives people the ability to interact with somebody on the beach when they have questions, and to also make sure that we're enforcing laws on the beach as well.
So now that you have those beach patrol officers primarily focused on that, where exactly are they patrolling, and where are the hot spots right now?
Of course, our hotspots are typically going to be the front beach area between County Park and the Windjammer. That just happens to be the most populated area on the beach due to parking. And so they patrol the entire beach, but they do tend to focus more in that area because that's where everybody's at. But we do tell them to drive the whole beach to visit everybody that they can.
And I've obviously kept up with your posters on the weekends, and of course I can't get to the beach because I live in North Charleston. But let me ask you this. How many people are actually coming over to the Isle of Palms and parking in your parking spots because of the summer season?
We will see, when I was out here on July 4th, we saw our parking spaces were full by 9:30, 9:45. So it was packed. And that's not uncommon for a Saturday or a Sunday during the summer, or even Fridays. We'll see those parking lots get full by about 10 o'clock. You'll see a little emptying around lunchtime, but then they'll refill really quickly. So that is our summer. We will have roughly 30,000 vehicles a day coming over here onto the island.
And Chief, are you all having any issues with people parking in locations that they're not supposed to park in?
Certainly. I think we've done a better job at identifying what those areas are, and there have been less of those taking place this summer, with the exception of July 4th. On July 4th, I think we saw more of it than we typically would, but we have a much larger number of visitors on July 4th than we would most summer days. So I think when people come out here and they've got their car full of children, I have kids, so I know how it goes. If I say we're going to the beach, then we're going to the beach. We're just going to have to make it happen. And I think that's what happened with some of them that were parking in those areas that were no parking. And there were even some that I encountered that I saw them get out of the car and say, "Hey, just FYI, I wouldn't park there. Right. Parking enforcement will write you a ticket, and it is not a cheap ticket." And they still park there because I guess they just wanted to go to the beach.
Do you believe? Are those parking tickets? I believe it's like $100 now, from what I read. Are those particular parking tickets higher than the average, well, the state average?
I don't know that for a fact. I've not pulled up the charges for the others, but I've heard other people say that. Again, I can't confirm that it
Right.
is or is not.
Right.
But they are $100 ticket with the exception of metered spaces. Metered spaces, like being there too long,
Right.
those are going to be $50 tickets on the front beach area. That's our business district.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I wish I can get back out there, but I'm going to wait till it cools down. But let me ask you, because I don't drive, so I have to, get out there by Uber or walk over. But yeah.
We've got that awesome
Oh yeah, the
Carter
shuttle.
shuttle bus that,
Yeah.
and I will
Yeah.
tell you, I saw it running on July 4th, and I was pretty impressed with the number of people that were using it. And you still sit in traffic, but you certainly don't have to drive around here looking for a parking spot when you could park over in Mount Pleasant, jump on that bus for free, and ride over here. People are using it, and that's a great resource.
Yeah, I know. Councilman Mike Seekins alluded to that recently on local media. But let me ask you, where are those spots that people are still parking where they're not supposed to park on the Isle of Palms?
Where we will typically see that is along Palm Boulevard. When they will go out there, they'll park to the left or right of where we have parking stalls. One thing DOT did, and some people don't like it, some people do, but they installed parking stops, little curbs. And to me, it is a great way to define where a parking area is. But we still have some people that will park where there are not parking curbs along Palm Boulevard and on the land side.
Right.
And that's where they're typically parking a spot that they're not supposed to be parking. So our message to everybody is look for the parking stop when you're looking at that angled parking and park where there are curbs.
And how many parking curbs are there altogether on the island?
I do not know that for sure. They do run from 21st Avenue. Typically, it actually picks up around 22nd, and they'll run down to about 38th. And they've got several, and those are on the land side. There's still parallel parking without curbs on the ocean side of Palm Boulevard. And there's a white line that's painted there. Park to the right of that white line. Don't block driveways. Don't block beach access paths. You'll be good to go. On busy days like 4th of July, Memorial Day, and Labor Day, they fill up really quick, so get here early.
Wow. So let me ask you, where does the city of Isle of Palms want to add more parking curbs on the island?
I don't know that there is an intention to do that. I do know they've added some spots along 41st Avenue at the Isle of Palms Marina. That's the city's marina. They've added some parking spaces there, and I believe there are some that are going to be paid parking in that area as well.
Wow. So how many of those paid parking meetings will be in that area?
I don't know that for sure, the number. It's just a little, not even a block long section that they've kind of filled in some dirt and made some parking there. And they've put curb stops there so people will know where to park. And there are signs that tell you how to pay for that parking and all the rules with it.
Well, are people paying attention to the rules when they actually go onto the beach itself, Chief?
I think that's an area where we can certainly do some improvement. We try to get messaging out. For the most part, yes, people come out here, they follow all the rules. It is not common for us to find somebody who intentionally comes out to violate laws. But there are some people that might forget that you're not allowed to have alcohol on the beach, or you're not allowed to have glass on the beach, or you're not allowed to smoke on the beach.
Right.
Our typical response is to say, hey, you may not know this, but this is an ordinance. You cannot do this, and give everybody the opportunity to comply before we issue any tickets or anything like that. For the most part, people do a fantastic job at coming out here and obeying the rules. Some of them they just may not know when they're from out of state.
Oh yeah. How many out-of-state tourists do you all had so far since Memorial Day?
I have no clue how to even get that number on how many are out of state, but I do know I have seen people, and I've talked to people from several different states that come down here, and a lot of them do it every year. This is kind of their thing this is their vacation spot, and so I know they come from all over the state. I've talked to people from other countries that come out here and spend time on our beaches. So I do know we get a lot of visitors. And we also get a lot of visitors that are local, that might not live here on the island, that come from Charleston, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, Somerville, or even the Columbia area or the upstate, and they'll come down here to spend some time on the beach. So it's one of my favorite things about working on a beach is the ability to meet people from all over and build those relationships with them. And every encounter is not a negative encounter. Most of the encounters that I have are very positive, where we're just hey, where are you from and how are you and thanks for visiting. So we get people from all over, and it's one of my favorite things.
I know you're trying to build relationships with the out of towners. How do you build that relationship with locals when it comes to parking and beach access?
Well, we look at it the same way for everybody. What we do for our residents, or we like to hold community meetings, but we also make sure that we hold meetings during the summer. Like we do coffee with a cop when there are visitors here too, so they can come encounter us. We'll purposely do some in the area where we know our visitors are most prevalent to be, like Front Beach. But then we also make sure we carry on those meetings after tourism season kind of slows down so that we can continue to build that relationship with the people who live here. And in all of those, we're asking them, what are we doing that we could do better? What are we doing right? What can we do better in? And how can we work together to resolve issues for the city of Isle of Palms?
But let me ask you this then, Chief. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your threats and opportunities when it comes to obviously public safety on the Isle of Palms?
One of our strengths would be our officers' drive for that community policing, and to get out here and talk to people. And I hate to throw out, because it's a buzzword, community policing, but I do believe that we do a good job. And it starts with something as simple as a wave. Roll the windows down, say hello to people, and that goes a long way. And so I think that is a strength. One of our threats are just like any other police department right now, where we are looking at staffing. We're not as short as we've been in the past, but we've still got positions that we're trying to fill, and that is a nationwide issue that everybody's dealing with. And we've built a team internally to look at that and see what we can do better. And some of our opportunities are that we can partner with places like Palmetto Pride to work on our littering. We partner with the aquarium. We partner with local organizations that do beach cleanups. We also look at ways we can partner with community organizations like Midlands Fatherhood Coalition, those different groups where we can help to look at what impacts the state, not just the city, on police and community interactions. And then other opportunities we have with recruiting would be going to different places to recruit. We want to make sure we're spreading out beyond the Charleston area to recruit people from all walks of life to make sure that we've got a good, diverse workforce here on the city of Isle of Palms.
So since you've had the community meetings and obviously the coffee with COP in relations to obviously the community policing initiative, what impact has that had actually on your police department and the city residents?
I think it goes a long way. A lot of them did not understand the different types of calls and reports that our officers were dealing with, and because we don't advertise everything we do as a police department.
Right.
And that's something that I think we needed to do better at in law enforcement in general, is to pull back that curtain and stop hiding and say, hey, we're people too. Come in and see what we do. And we did that with our residents. We encouraged them to come by and visit with us, and then we like to show them the stats on what we're doing. What are your officers doing? What's your taxpayer money paying for? And I think that opened the eyes of a lot of them to understand that we're here for them. We're part of the community, and we all want to work together to make a safe environment, whether you live here, work here, or you visit here. We all need to be at the table together.
Who and what are you trying to recruit right now when it comes to the police department?
I have a very strict hiring standard, and I'm looking for people who are going to come out here and be professional and respectful. But they understand people too. We're not robots. We don't just go through and check boxes. The human interaction element is crucial to me, and that ability to talk to people. So we're trying to reach out and trying to make sure that we, again, recruit a diverse workforce, and people that understand and have empathy, so that when they're dealing with people who might be in a stressful situation, that we can, sometimes the solution is not going to jail. Sometimes there are other solutions that we can put in place to truly help an individual. Sometimes they do need to go to jail. But we want people that can have that ability to think through it, to have that empathy, to help them resolve the root issue if there's a problem, and just not to kind of ignore somebody when they're having an issue at that point, whether it's an emergency, because everything's not an emergency to us, but it's an emergency to that individual calling, and we want to treat it as though it is and have that respect for them and that empathy to understand where they're at.
That is a big topic right now, Chief, as you know, mental health. How strategic and how equipped is your police department with this particular issue?
We've got several officers that we send through the National Alliance of Mental Illness training. It's a week-long class, and we make sure the goal is that every police officer here goes through that. And I'm one of the instructors that teaches during that week. And then we also bring in other organizations to help with us. I talk with DHEC about different things related to suicide and how we're tracking that so that we can do better, and the different things. So I think we're doing well. There's always room for improvement. And there's definitely a lot of training that we can continue to put our officers through. I do think we're doing a pretty decent job at doing that, and even at the same time trying to make sure that we're capturing ways to keep our personnel healthy and well at the same time. So it's a room to improve. There certainly is, but I think we're doing a good job, and we're trying to make sure that our officers have as much training as possible to be able to help people.
So where do you want to improve now in an area of obviously training and actually keeping your officers safe?
Well, we've actually applied for a grant that would help us to host training for our personnel to provide different resources for our officers, and then to provide resources to people that we encounter that may need those different resources. We're even trying to work with the mental health department to see how we can work together to kind of reduce some of the resources that are being spent. Right now, it takes a lot of people when we are doing a mental check on an individual, where we've got to have EMS, we have to have police, we have to have the Department of Mental Health. And I think we can work together to reduce that a little bit, because that can make any situation, when you have that many people involved, it can escalate it without intending to. The intent might be to help, but the mere presence of all those individuals can send a situation a little bit more elevated than it needs to be. So we're looking at ways we can even improve on that area as well.
If you were to have any money for, creating a mental health department just for a mental health police officer, would you be in favor for that?
If we had the ability to staff a position that would help us to resolve this, and there's a lot of departments that are starting to do that. They're not officers, but they're bringing in non-sworn personnel that are helping in that area. And I definitely think that is something that, as a state, we should be investing in all of our criminal justice organizations, so that we can make that there. But even as a city, if that was the money and we had it there, I certainly would invest in that.
And obviously, I know you're, as far as investment, you're investing in a whole lot of resources to basically keep the island safe. What are those other resources that you and your team are actually focusing on right now from a trending standpoint?
Our resources. So one thing I've learned throughout my career is that we are only as good as the ability to contact those resources. And I'm a big proponent of get out and talk to people. And we've started working with the school districts. Earlier this year, I went and met with superintendents from each of the school districts in the area, met with them in person to talk about how we can work together. We meet with different organizations in the state, like mental health, like I mentioned, DHEC. And then, of course, we always work on our local law enforcement partnerships, where we're bringing in the different agencies on how we can work together, because what impacts my jurisdiction is going to impact Mount Pleasant. It's going to impact Somerville. And if we're all working together, then we can provide a safer low country. And so we want to get them all together. We actually do breakfasts once a quarter with the chiefs from the different municipalities and the sheriffs in the Tri-County area, so that we can work on that. We've also been working on building that relationship with our federal partners and even our counterparts over at EMS and fire services, so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page. Because when something happens, a big critical incident, we all are showing up. And it's much easier to work together when we've had that relationship prior to that than it is if we're just meeting for the first time at a critical incident.
Speaking of a big incident, obviously one took place last year on the Palms. What lessons have you all learned thus far from that particular incident, from then to now?
Well, our biggest thing is gathering information. When we look back at April 7th of 2023, we became aware of that incident that morning. And getting resources on a short notice proved to be difficult. So what we've done now is we've focused a lot on analytical information and gathering information, and using our relationships and partnerships with other police departments, other state agencies, and other county organizations to help gather that information when it becomes available. And we've even had some incidents where we had planned senior skip day this year, and we were able to draw in a lot of resources to include school districts that were there with us, County Emergency Management was there with us, and we've even talked with different cellular organizations like T-Mobile that will be present with us when we do these things in the future. Just building those resources, because then it gives us a lot more to draw on and work on that. And that was when we had that information, we built that for this year, the Senior Skip Day response. I think we had a very good outcome for us with a lot of our partners that came to the table. We could not have done it without all these other agencies and organizations that came to the table to help us.
And when it comes, I know all about Senior Skip Day from my days in school at Burke High School downtown here. But let me ask you, when it came to that Senior Skip Day this year, how many of those kids were actually skip school to come to the Isle of Palms?
We did encounter some that were out here, but we also encountered some that would drive out here and they saw our presence,
right,
and they decided that they did not want to stay here. So there were some that did come out to the beach. They didn't do anything wrong. They obeyed all the laws, and we're fine. We're not trying to turn anybody away from the beach. We just want you, when you're here, obey the law. Don't put anybody else in a situation that makes them unsafe, and we're perfectly kosher. And that's what happened this year. We did have some that left, some that we encountered that said they didn't want to stay here because there were so many law enforcement officers, and that's fine too.
Yes, sir. So, Chief, let me ask you this then, and I don't want to give out too much information from an intellectual standpoint and an intelligence standpoint, but how many of those officers were stationed at certain locations, or were they in one central location?
We have a plan that we put in place, and it is a plan that we've built two different versions of it. We've got a plan that we can roll out when we have very short notice that will increase our personnel and our stance, and then we have a plan that rolls out when we have time and we can gather more resources. But yes, in our plans, we do strategically place officers and different assets where we know people will be coming, or the routes that they have to travel on to get to us, which is, there's only two ways on the island. You either come across the Isle of Palms connector, or you come across the Hunley Bridge from Sullivan's Island onto Isle of Palms. So we use assets to monitor those as well. So we're watching in all different directions, and we do place people in those areas where we know people might be, and sometimes it's just for a intelligence gathering where they're there to feed information to us.
Now, going back obviously to this summer, Chief, when it comes to those beach patrol officers, how many of those officers are there all together?
We have 3 beach service officers this year, and their whole goal, like I said, is they're on a side-by-side vehicle, a little utility terrain vehicle, and they're patrolling the beach. And most of their encounters really are not enforcement-wise. They're really just talking to people. People have questions, and they can answer them, but they do have the ability to kind of step up that enforcement level as well.
So when it comes to enforcement, what are those things that they've had to step up on?
What we've stepped up on littering. We've had a couple of littering charges, the glass on the beach, the alcohol on the beach, and the smoking on the beach. And those are all things that really impact us, but they also play another role that most people don't realize. We don't have an ordinance that requires you to fill your holes back in when you've dug them. We encourage people to, and our BSOs will stop individuals and say, hey, have fun, but make sure you're not digging too deep, that it's unsafe for you, and make sure you bury it back. And it's an opportunity to have the education with them about why that's important when we've got sea turtles that are nesting on the island. But what they'll do too is when we find one that's not been buried back, we will use our beach service officers and our code enforcement to fill those holes back in, because we've had incidents where turtles will either redirect because they were coming to nest, and then that hole will redirect them and they go back out into the ocean, or they wind up having babies get stuck in a hole that they can't get out of because they've fallen into it.
Wow. Jesus. Well, you mentioned the code enforcement officers, Chief. So let me ask you this. When it comes to those littering charges and whatnot that has transpired so far on the beach, are they writing those tickets, or are the actual beach safety officers writing those tickets?
Well, both of them. So our code enforcement and our beach service officers will issue municipal summonses. They're a city version of a ticket. They're not the same ticket that a police officer issues. And they have the ability to write those for those different city violations. And so they do write those. Code enforcement and the BSOs will. And then our police officers, if it's something that needs to be enforced through a state statute, our police officers will come in and issue those citations.
Now, have they been able to do that thus far, as far as the police officers?
We haven't had many issues where we've had to. A couple of them we had to. Maybe some people weren't giving their legitimate information about who they are, and police officers had to get involved to help address that. again, majority of the time, the first approach is, hey, you can't do that here. You may not know it, but you can't. And a lot of times when people are getting tickets, it's because they either did not listen or it's something where they should have known and they're just obviously breaking a city ordinance that they passed signs that said that it was a violation.
Yes. How many of those violations have you all had to give out so far?
Give me 1 second and I can get that to you. Pulling it up right now.
Yes, sir.
It looks like total year to date, we've issued 50 citations along the beach. And those citations have been for things like alcohol on the beach, smoking on the beach, glass on the beach, vehicles on the beach, nudity on the beach, beaching boats on the beach, destroying sea oats, and then a couple of leash law violations on the beach as well.
Wow. I know that's obviously something that's legal, I believe still legal down on Daytona Beach in Florida, but how many cars do you all actually see from your perspective, the police department's perspective, coming on Palms Beach?
We'll only see 1 or 2 a year. It's not something we see a lot of, but occasionally somebody will. And most of the time when they're doing that, in my experience, they are not sober when they're doing that. So most of the time, there are other issues along with the fact that they were driving onto the beach. So it's not a big prevalent problem, but it is a problem that we experience a couple times a year.
Wow. What are those prevalent problems, Chief, that you see that are actually creeping up and becoming a trend on the Isle of Palms?
Yeah, for us, we've been tracking our narcotics cases. We track our DUIs, and the most concerning to me would be our impaired driving. We have a lot of impaired driving cases that occur out here on the island. For example, this year alone, we have had, let me find it on my report here, 72 DUI charges since the beginning of the year through the end of June. And that's a significant amount for such a small area. There are a lot of people that will come out here and consume alcohol and then get behind the wheel. And I think they may think they're okay, but that is obviously a danger to everybody that's out and about, the person driving the vehicle, those that are driving other vehicles, those that are walking along the sidewalks. DUIs can certainly have a very negative impact for a lot of people, and they are dangerous. And people die every year because of DUIs. So that is one of my most concerning issues that we see going on out here, that we are definitely have a step up in enforcement.
Well, let me ask you about the enforcement. Do you have any checkpoints near Front Beach or the Isle of Palms Connector or 42nd Avenue?
We have done checkpoints on Front Beach, on Palm Boulevard, in those different areas where we know we get traffic, and we'll announce them when we do them. But sure. We'll have some coming up this year for sure that we haven't necessarily done yet. We've done some this year and some last year. But yes, we do. We try to proactively enforce the DUI laws and make sure that we keep our streets safe.
And speaking of safe, Chief, how are you and your particular department strategizing so that you can actually make, say, Labor Day better than 4th of July holiday weekend?
Well, we look at our staffing and how we can, every time we have a weekend where we have a lot of people, we always step back and say, what could we do differently? How can we make sure that we improve for the next time? We look at staffing. We look at making sure that we have personnel that can drive our paddy wagon if we have a lot of people that are going to jail, so that we don't lose officers from patrol going to the jail on Leeds Avenue, which is a long drive for us. So we look at those types of personnel. We use our drones so that we have the advantage to get in the air and kind of see something from an elevated view so that we know what's happening. And using even some of our volunteers that come out. We've been really working on building a volunteer program that's not doing police work, necessarily getting out and arresting people, but helping us with drones, helping us with documentation and those different types of things.
What exactly are you guys seeing from above with the drones?
Well, we can start to see, a lot of times we use it if there's a missing person or somebody who's out in the water. We get a lot of calls about distressed swimmers, and we'll use our drone to go up and to make sure that they're okay, or even communicate with them, where we've been able to come over the speaker and say, hey, give us a thumbs up if you're okay. A lot of times it's a parasailer who is perfectly fine, but when they go down, somebody on the beach will assume that they are in distress. So they'll call us. We're able to get the drone out there before the fire department has to put all their resources into the water, and we're able to see that they're okay or not okay. It's got the ability that if they're in there, we can use the thermal imaging to see where people are if they're in the water, and we've used that in the past as well.
Wow. And what other resources do you want to invest in next to advance, obviously, public safety?
Well, one of the things that we've got coming up this year is we're looking to build on our drone. We've got a smaller drone. We want to make something that's a little more useful for us in a whole public safety setting, because we use our drone for police calls, for fire calls, and for a lot of different things, and even storm response. If we've got a post-storm, we can go out and do an assessment with it. So we're building on that. We've got a K9 that we've brought in, and Sandy is doing fantastic. She's been able to come out here and help build those community relationships, but she's also doing well with tracking and narcotic searches. So we're looking at some of those things, and then just really building on ways that we can best utilize our personnel to cover the areas that are the busiest for us out here on the weekends. We've created a traffic unit as well that will come out and help us with those DUIs or those different complaints. Like when school starts back up, we know we've got people that might drive past school buses, so we'll use that traffic unit to address those issues as well.
Where do you see the most narcotics on the Isle of Palms as far as your search is concerned?
When I pull up the map, you'll see it in that front beach area, the business district area. Again, it's the most populated area because it's got all the parking. It's where the businesses are. It's where the bars are. So we'll see more people there. It's just more likely you're going to see more incidents in that area because there's a higher level of people, a higher number of people in that area.
And lastly, Chief, when it comes to staffing, how many more officers do you need right now for this particular season and beyond?
I have one vacancy right now that we're looking to fill for police officer, and then one vacancy for animal control that we're hoping to fill within the next few weeks.
Wow. Well, we wish you all the good luck this summer on the Isle of Palms. But for now, City of Isle of Palms Police Chief Kevin Cornett, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. It's good to spend time with you.
Always, likewise.